I have now realized that every deck I enjoy playing is apparently a 2? How's it going, everybody? Apologies if I don't sound very well. I am recording while very, very sick, but I did want to go ahead and talk about what recently happened for Magic the Gathering, and that is the bracket system finally being formalized, at least a beta version of it, finally being formalized for us to use. Kevin Verhey decided to make a post on the Magic the Gathering website announcing the progress on the bracket system, and we've seen a shift of mentality from the original bracket system to what we have now. So real quick, to lay a foundation, let's talk about the original bracket system that was proposed to us. Now, the original system we were proposed basically said, hey, your lowest power decks are here at level 1, these are going to be your precons, then you're going to have your level 2 decks where you've got a little bit of optimization, level 3 is big optimized decks, and then at level 4 you have decks that are at the highest power possible. Think CEDH. And if you look at what's in the brackets, it kind of makes sense. I mean, at level 4 you're seeing Vampiric Tutor, and CEDH has a lot of tutors. Mass Land Denial is at the top of the list as well. These are generally unfun mechanics to deal with, but once you get to level 3, you get stuff like Drainus Magistrate, so hard Stax effects that are also CEDH staples, and still tutors as well. So what's really the defining factor here between level 4 and level 3? Is it just how specific the tutor is? Now, when you get down to level 2, you had Fabricate, which says only grabs artifacts, and it costs a little more mana. But then once you get to level 1, things get weird. At level 1, it's based on access, cards that can easily go in any deck. But the problem with this is that, you know what goes really well in every deck? Some of the most efficient, low-costed removal spells of all time, like Swords to Plowshare. So, I mean, does that mean that running all the most efficient low-cost removal makes my deck a level 1 jank deck? I don't think so. And of course, in the original version of this list, there was always the ever-present problem of Sol Ring. Now, my stance on Sol Ring has been clarified many times, but I'll go ahead and say it again. I think Sol Ring should be banned. I understand it's a poster child for the Commander format. I get that. I understand people have sentimental attachment to various kinds of Sol Ring, but the kind of games that Sol Ring creates every single time disproportionately are games of either arch enemy or unfun games for 3 out of 4 people at the table, or, you know, anybody who didn't draw their Sol Ring Arcane Signet opener. This card accelerates all decks to an absurd degree, and really, the only argument we have for keeping it in Commander is an argument from tradition. And an appeal to tradition is a style of fallacy where you basically say something needs to remain the way it is because that's the way that it always has been. I mean, literally, the graphic behind me should be explaining it fairly well. Definition: the logical fallacy occurs when someone claims that because an action is traditional, it must be good or true. Now, as much as you're probably used to hearing this specific fallacy at your family's Thanksgiving table, it doesn't do anything to defend what Sol Ring does to warp games. I am, however, also an advocate that a player should not remove Sol Ring from their deck if everybody else at the table is also playing Sol Ring, because why should one player not have a fun time when they have an opportunity to have the same power level game as everybody else at the table? Anybody in my comment section who does the whole, well, if you don't like it, don't play it, ignores the fact that that only works in a vacuum, that doesn't function the minute that other people at the table are playing these cards that you don't want to play with. So the usual way to solve this in any game with an overarching committee on balance is to remove the card from the game, but I digress. Gavin does go on to say in this little tidbit that for most Commander players, nothing is actually changing. These bracket systems are suggestions and guidelines more than they are hard and fast rules. Also, this system cannot stop all bad actors. For instance, you may be able to get rid of a Sol Ring in a banning. This is not his example, this is my example, but you can't get rid of other cards that speed decks up to a similar degree, such as, while not the same amount of mana, you can speed up a green deck far faster with a Wild Growth or a Search for Tomorrow on turn 1 than you would be able to speed up in other colors. We're always going to have the problem of green kind of being the most loved color and the safest color for all things Magic the Gathering. This list is not going to change that. And much like how this system can't fix things that are inherently broken within Commander, it cannot fix bad actors, which is what Gavin specifically talks about. If someone wants to lie to you and say their deck is just a tiny small bean outside of, you know, joking about it, then you're still going to have to deal with the fact that they're a slimy, scummy liar, and you'll have to kick them out of your table as soon as you can. No bracket system's going to save you from their stink, except maybe, you know, A stick of speed stick might do the job. Who knows? Magic the Gathering players, bathe better in 2025. Then we move on to the number 3 thing that Gavin wants to note here. This is, in fact, a beta test. This is not meant to be a finalized list, and the longer that players are willing to test out this bracket system, the more they are going to be able to work out kinks in the bracket system. So, that should help out a ton, and as far as I can tell, the current bracket system is not necessarily about power. These are about vibes. These are about the kinds of game experiences that one is looking for. They are not necessarily about varying power levels, but Bracket 1 is now considered the exhibition bracket. There are few tutors, you have no what are called game changer cards, you have no 2-card infinites, and you have no mass land denial. But once you get to the level 2 games, the core experiences, you have everything the same but no chaining extra turns. Now, it's interesting to me that in this graphic, no chaining extra turns is not there for the level 1 games, but again, that's about exhibition and vibes, less about power. Once you get to power level 3, or I guess bracket 3, it's not power level, then you still have an inability to use mass land denial, you still can't chain extra turns, but you do have the ability to use late game 2-card infinite combos. Think your Exquisite Blood Sanguine Bond style combos. These are the things that are used to just end the games at that point. Now, I will say this, I personally have a distaste for those combos. I've actually personally had a handful of friends' decks where I've gone through them to figure out why they don't feel like they're working, and they're just kind of chock full of 2 or 3 of these 2-card infinites, and when I ask why they're there in a deck that otherwise has nothing to do with that combo, the answer is always, well, I needed to find a way to win the game. But like, if your deck is themed correctly, you can find ways to win a game within what your deck is trying to do. An Exquisite Blood combo doesn't really belong in a King Kenrith deck so much as they belong in an Aristocrats deck. Otherwise, you're just kind of playing them to play them. I also had another friend desperately try to defend a 2-card combo he had in his Heliod deck, where he had the Walking Ballista in it, and when I tried to point out, like, hey, what's the point of that? I thought this was supposed to be an Angels deck that was, you know, on theme for divine judgment and all that fun stuff. He's like, well, I thought it would be thematic, like a god smiting you. And like, what? How is the god smiting you? A gun? So all things considered, I have a personal distaste for these kinds of combos. I like Wu Goldberg machines, I like the feeling of assembling big things together to make them work, or a deck functioning with high synergy up until that point. So I think most of my decks are not going to end up being level 3 decks in general, but I'll show you where this gets a little funky. You are allowed in the level 3 area to use up to 3 game changer cards, and we'll go over that list here in a bit. Once you get to the optimized list, then you don't have any restrictions other than the actual commander ban list, and once you get to CEDH, then you have no restrictions, and also there is a mentality. I've also seen a lot of players get confused about what CEDH is, and I hate to tell you this, but CEDH is quantified mostly by the mentality you go into going into the game. You have a spike mentality walking into the game, you're going to win at any cost, you're going to win as efficiently as possible. You can have 2 decks that are both CEDH decks, but if you have a CEDH veteran playing one, and you have somebody who's just a casual player holding onto the deck playing the other, they're not going to know how to interact with an 8-card stack of cards, but the CEDH player is. That mentality going in does as much to shape that game experience as the actual makeup of the deck. Gavin does go into specifics after this, saying that Bracket 1 is where you throw down with your ultra-casual commander deck. Winning is not the goal, it's about showing off something unusual. Bracket 2 is your average commander precon. Now, he does say average commander precon because there are decks that use cards that will show up in the list of things that you're not supposed to run, the Game Changers list. Some of those things have shown up in precons. I have a gripe with the Game Changers list. I'll get into it here in a second. Once you get to the Bracket 3, you're allowed 3 cards from the Game Changers list and no intentional early 2-card infinite combos. They can exist in your deck, but they are not meant to be grabbed early on. Though this does have a bit of an interesting sidebar where there is no difference in a commander game between somebody intentionally using a 2-card combo and somebody just naturally drawing into it early. That the vibes of that game are identical for the other 3 players in any way. Like they all had a non-game where nothing happened and they just had to shuffle up their cards and try again. So the intentionality here is interesting, but it's hard to quantify, though this is at least better quantified than the original list. When you get to bracket 4, like I said before, it's optimized, go wild, use mass land destruction, use whatever you want. And then once you get to CEDH, this is your high-powered competitive mindset. Now, let's get to the game changers list, because this is where I think people are going to have the most interesting conversations. Your game changers in each and every category are listed here, and let's go over each of them and why they probably would have been picked for the game changer category. The following creatures are considered game changers: Drannith Magistrate for his ability to cuck games completely, Turgid God of Fright for a similar ability, but, you know, taking everybody's things at all. I don't think anybody's ever had a fun game playing against a Turgid, I'm gonna be honest. Thassa's Oracle, obviously, this is like the go-to win condition for CEDH. It makes sense it would be in the game changer category. Jin-Gitaxi's Core Augur, yeah, there are very few decks that reanimate this that end up being fun for everyone else. This is why the only deck that I play this in anymore is an arch enemy deck, where the goal is to be the table's villain that needs to be taken down. Kinnan Bonded Prodigy, this is the backbone of a billion infinites. Urza High Lord Artificer, the backbone of a billion artifact infinites. Then you have Grand Arbiter Augustine the Fourth. Again, I don't think anybody has had a game with a Grand Arbiter deck where they have said, yeah, that was a fun game, I want to do that again. Opposition Agent, obviously this is used to make sure that people aren't able to search their decks. Normally this card is not that strong in casual games where there's fewer tutors, but the fact that this can turn an Evolving Wilds off, of all things, is a good enough reason to put it on the no-no list. Then you've got Vorinclex Voice of Hunger. I agree with this one when he comes out. The player who takes care of him is the one who gets punished with his ability. Of all things, this is a stupidly unfun mechanic to deal with. Then you have Winota Joiner of Forces and Yuriko Tiger's Shadow. Both of these are just giant value engines in the command zone, and Yuriko specifically is not able to be interacted with for any reasonable amount of time, since you can just play 0-mana creatures and run off with them. If you've ever played against Yuriko, you understand what I mean, and if you don't know what I mean, then just play against a decent Yuriko deck and you'll understand the frustration of dealing with this card. For sorceries, Demonic Tutor and Imperial Seal makes sense. Jessica's Will is one of the strongest advantage pieces in red. It is one of the strongest rituals in red. Makes perfect sense. Expropriate is in here as well. At 9 mana, this would seem kind of silly, but the fact that this card itself, you always at least get 1 extra turn off of it. And if there are players at the table who are not used to Expropriate, then the player playing this might get multiple extra turns. It's just a turn monopoly at this point. Though the fact that other extra turn spells don't really make their way onto this list does confuse me a little bit. The 9 mana one that requires player stupidity is the one on here. But we have Fierce Guardianship, which is a free spell. Makes sense, this would be on here. Deflecting Swat not being in here as well confuses me a little bit, but I digress. Ad Nauseam makes sense in here. This is a CEDH card through and through. Force of Will makes sense here. It's a free counter spell. Mystical Tutor and Vampiric Tutor and Enlightened Tutor all make sense. They get to be played on the very first turn of the game, and they search your library for a plethora of powerful cards. And then Psych Rift. This is the best one-sided board wipe in Magic the Gathering by far. So I do understand this one being in here. Every other one-sided board wipe has some kind of loop you need to jump through, is not as modal as the Cyclonic Rift, and cannot be abused as much as an instant cast Cyclonic Rift on the third turn player's turn as you move into your turn to swing out for game. Yeah, it makes sense. This is just the strongest, best in its class card. Then you've got CEDH staples of Grim Monolith, Chrome Mox, Lion's Eye Diamond, Mana Vault, and Mox Diamond. They are there for being the fastest of the fast mana we currently have available, with Mana Crypt being gone. One Ring is gone as well. This card is hard to interact with. I wholly understand it being taken out. I don't think this thing should have had the Indestructible Clause, especially when you can combine this with stuff like Unwinding Clock to just get way more advantage than any commander player is able to reasonably deal with with. Trainer Sphere makes sense on here. It is a Stax piece along with Grand Arbiter, and Bolas's Citadel being on here makes sense as well, though I am a little concerned that its buddy Omniscience did not make its way into the list. I would have expected that to be in here too, for all the same reasons that Bolas's Citadel is here. Then you have the, would you like to pay the 1? Would you like to pay the 2? Would you like to play the 2? Cards that give tons of advantage to blue and white. All of these being on the watch list make perfect sense. Survival of the Fittest, this is the strongest version of this style of effect in green. I understand this being on the watch list as well. It's also on the reserve list, so players don't really get a chance to play with this thing. And, you know, we have cards that do a similar ability like Evolution Leap that cost the exact same amount, but they put it into your hand from the top of your deck instead of from your entire deck. So, like, you can get this effect in other cards that cost less and aren't as oppressive. Underworld Breach makes sense as a card being taken away as well. It is the backbone of a billion infinite combos in Storm. And then you get to the lands that are on the watch list. Glacial Chasm, this is the reason I run Beast Within in every deck I possibly can. Gaia's Cradle, Ancient Tomb, Tabernacle of Pendrell Vale, and Sarah's Sanctum. The Sanctum and the Gaia's Cradle and the Ancient Tomb make a lot of mana over the course of the game at an insane rate. And Tabernacle, if you have the $2,000 to spend on this, don't put it in your commander deck, okay? It's fine. The staxing non-game effect the Tabernacle at Pendrell Vale creates for a majority of decks is not fun to deal with and is not worth the $2,000 for you to lose all of your friends. Like I mentioned, there are a lot of cards that are missing from this list that I would like to see. I don't understand why Omniscience is not on here, if Bolas's Citadel is going to be on here, but, you know, I digress. This is a good start, but there is one important thing that is missing that we need to talk about. We still don't have access to the Soul Ring on this list. So there is an explanation given in here, which I want to get to. Actually, I'll go ahead and do that right now. Gavin specifically says that, well, it's Soul Ring. It's iconic, which, again, we're going to go back to that appeal to tradition fallacy. This is not a good argument for the keeping of Soul Ring. It's literally just that players like it, and it has been in the game from the get-go. That's the only reason that this is one of the ones that is kept in. That's it. There's no actual good defense for this one. I'm sorry. I am willing to die on the hill that Soul Ring is an unhealthy card for most players to have access to in this game. But that said, I want to go ahead and propose a quick change to this. If we are all giving our feedback on this list, and that is something that Gavin does specifically invite, then here's my first bit of feedback. I love the idea. The fact that this is not about power level so much as it is about vibes makes a lot of sense. The power level conversation was too hard to quantify, and I would argue is in fact impossible to truly quantify because of the ways cards interact in this game. But I would say that the list of things that need to be watched out for needs to be expanded. If Grim Monolith is on here, why is Basalt Monolith not on here? It's used in all the same combos. If we are going to see a Bolas's Citadel, why do we not see an Omniscience on here? It's used in all of it creates the same kinds of scenarios. In some cases, can even create stronger scenarios. It's interesting to me to see Thassa's Oracle on here and not see a Labman. I get that he's not as powerful, but all things considered, he's being used for the same kind of deck with the same kind of win. It's also interesting to me to see all the tutors on here, but not a fully expansive list of the tutors. Worldly Tutor isn't in here as an example. So I do think the list itself is missing a few crucial pieces based on the mentality of the cards that have been taken away. If that mentality is going to be there for some of the 1-mana tutors, I think it should be there for all of the 1-mana tutors. It should be there for Gamble, and it should be there for Worldly Tutor as well. Again, if you're going to have the mentality for one, have it for all. And in that same vein, if you're going to have the mentality for the Chrome Mox, you should have that mentality for the Soul Ring. But I do have a compromise with Soul Ring. If you want to have Soul Ring as a 100% guaranteed thing in all games, then my suggestion would be, instead of there being 3 cards from the Game Changer list available at level 3, make it 2 cards available at level 3. Consider that Soul Ring to be your auto-included card at level 3 at all times, whether or not the player is running the Soul Ring, because mathematically, most players are running the Soul Ring. And if you accept that, then you are able to make a little bit of space, and now only 2 cards are available from the Game Changers list for any deck at level 3. Now, the reason that I say this is I decided to peruse Moxfield to take a look at most of my decks to see where they rank in power. Well, again, not in power, in vibes. It's very hard to have this conversation and differentiate the deck's power from the deck's vibes. But one of the strongest decks I have right now is my Ruby deck, my Ruby Daring Tracker deck, which I have played extensively now at various tournaments. And this is currently sitting at bracket 2 because it doesn't have any Game Changers, has no mass land denial, has no extra turn cards, has no tutors. It doesn't need them. Then when I look at my arch enemy deck, my Sauron Lieutenant's deck, it is sitting at bracket 3, and it's only at bracket 3 because it has a Jin Gitaxias Core Augur in it. I would say that if I put this deck down at a bracket 2 table, which I can do just by removing the Jin Gitaxias in, the way this deck has been built is way above anything you would expect from any kind of precon. This thing is an absolute terrifying monster when I sit down and play it at tables with people. It is running all kinds of powerful shit in here that are easy to get out on turns 1 and 2 because of the fast mana system in it and the fact that I am running a ton of ways to reanimate cards. This deck, outside of the Core Augur, is considered a bracket 2 deck, playable at the same tables as precon decks are playable at, which is a reason why I would think there needs to be a bit of an expansion on that viable cards list. The Jin Gitaxias Core Augur is strong enough, but I mean, come on, you can't deny the power that a Valgavoth brings to a table. You can't deny the way that an Archon of Cruelty can dominate a table if brought out early enough. Likewise, my Sephiroth control deck sits at bracket 3 because it has a Bolas's Citadel. Likewise, if I look at, say, my Achik combo deck, which is a combo deck, its job is to get its combo online and just delete the table by turn 5 or 6. And the Achik combo deck is sitting at level 2. Again, available at precon level. Most of the decks that I have made over the year are all level 2 decks, only because they are missing a handful of things, and I've always built with the same mentality of not running tutors and just trying to run more consistency in general. And yet, for some reason, all of these are level 2 decks, which is weird to me because a lot of these decks overpower anything that I would see at a precon table. But again, it's not about power, it's about vibes, and I have to keep reminding myself of that, despite the fact that the vibes of the game are directly influenced by the power level of the game. All in all, though, aside from the very wishy-washy definitions between what is a vibes-based game and what is a game that is being defined by the power level of the decks at the table, I do like this new system. It feels much more cohesive than the previous 2 systems that we had and had been proposed. The power level system always boiled down to your deck being a 7, and nobody ever knew what the fuck their power level was, and the original proposed idea for brackets being a power level measurement was never that good to begin with. I liked it because I liked it in concept, but I wanted to see what the execution was going to be. I like this more. This feels like a better executed version of that bracket system. And hell, maybe I like this. Maybe the reason that I don't like the original bracket system that was shown to us as much now is because this system is so much better than the other one. So, hey, all things considered, I am very happy that the system is where it is. Now, the one thing that is confusing to me, though, is the exhibition system for the decks, like the exhibition bracket. I don't know what the hell an exhibition deck is going to be, because technically, if you're going to have the example that's given is like the Weatherlight crew, where you just have all the Weatherlight characters on, but like, that's how my Nicol Bolas deck is built, and that thing is an absolute terror at any table it stands at, so maybe that's just because cards with Bolas in the name are naturally powerful. I don't know, but I would never play that game at an exhibition table. Ever. That all said, I want to know y'all's thoughts on this. I'm excited to see what kind of games we put out with all this stuff here. I am excited to see how these games will pan out with the new bracket system. And again, apologies for how I sound today. I am sick. And I have had to pause recording a lot during this. Thank you all for watching. Support me if you want to on Patreon. I've got I've got to take a drink. Insert end of video tagline here.
Hey, just wanted to give a quick thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who help keep me afloat and help keep this channel going. YouTube and Twitch are wonderful platforms, but at the end of the day, stability is not one of their strong suits. If you want to support my channel, then obviously Patreon is one of the best ways of doing that. Link is in the description. But I do want to personally thank everybody who has contributed to the channel. Those people would be Red Joker, Purple Poundini, Jemshin, Britzkrieg, Jupe the Malignant, Michael, Ravelern, Mabbity Babbity, Astral Frontier, Autumn and Angel, Nixie Chan, Mark Anthony, Victorian Alchemist, I'm not saying the last part of that, and you know that. Arcton Arclacier, Kiratorian, Dren Hadamata, Jordan M, John L, Lord Bleck, Smiling Game Master, and Fireshard. And everyone else who supports my channel and lets me do what I do full time. This is a dream job of mine that I never believed that I would be able to take full time, and with your help, I've been able to do it. So thank you so very much for that. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you all enjoy, and I hope you all are having a wonderful time. I will see you all in the next one, hopefully.